a few years after I decided to make the jump into real estate full-time, I actually ended up getting diagnosed with cancer 2 years after I left that stability. But honestly, that I think was a turning point and made me realize that I actually made the right decision because I had full control.
This month marks 5 years since you finished your treatment. What is the first thing that comes to mind?
Sometimes it doesn't feel real. Obviously, I never thought I would ever encounter something like getting cancer. What can I do so if and when life throws these curveballs at you, what can I do to support myself and set myself up to be able to focus more on the chemo and taking care of myself versus like, how am I gonna pay the bills? And that's when I flipped a switch and I was like, we gotta buy something. I started going to meetings and just chatting with people and throwing it out into the universe. And then we bought our first place, bought our second place 2 years later. Cancer was the catalyst for life is short. You gotta just take the risk and go after what you want.
Welcome to the podcast. Today we're going to be talking to Gabby Demac, cancer survivor and real estate investor and educator, and my friend. Hi, Gabby. It's so good to see you.
Thanks for having me, and I'm pumped to be here.
Okay, so before we start, I just gave like a really quick overview of what is it that you do, but how would you describe what you do? Who do you help right now? What are you focused on right now?
Yeah, so right now, very much the way I like to describe it is I like to help first-timers, whether they're buyers, sellers, or investors, move with confidence. And we do that through education and strategy. So we really just take a unique approach to everyone's situation, everyone's goals, and we figure out what's going to work best for them. We make a plan to go get it, and we get started. So.
Okay, so that sounds like really official. I've never done real estate investing before. And I'm really interested, before we dive into your whole story, like how did you even get into this? Because you came from biomedical engineering of all things.
I did.
And I'm just here remembering just being back in college with engineers, and I can't imagine they would like do anything else. So how did you end up here?
So I like to joke and say that honestly, I grew up around it. So my dad was in residential real estate sales his entire life, my whole life. So he started when I was born. He built his own company, grew that very locally to central Massachusetts. And so I grew up helping him out. I did marketing materials. I hosted open houses with him and things like that. So it was always something that I was aware of from the sales side. And then I went into engineering. I loved that for a little while. But then there was some pull that I was just like, I got to do something different. You know, lifestyle-wise, just longevity-wise too. I was watching these big, CEOs of the companies that I was working with, and that was all that they had. And the work was their life. And I was like, there's got to be something a little bit different. So I got into residential sales first. I decided to make the jump and get into that. And then through meeting people, I learned more and more about investing and the types of investing and the doors that it could open for people. And so finally, after a few years of doing sales, I dipped my toe into the investment side of things. And it's been 5 years and I haven't looked back yet. So,
All right, for everybody who's listening, who's not super aware of what real estate investing really is. It sounds like you put money in, you get money out. But I want to kind of paint a picture for what that actually means.
So, yeah, that's actually a really good point to bring up because it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And what I like to almost pride myself on is we've just taken a very practical approach to it. I have a lot of friends who are big, successful investors. They've purchased in a small time frame 30, 40, 50 units and doors is what they say. So they have 50 different apartments that they rent out and things like that in such a short period of time. We have done what I like to call house hacking. So basically, in terms of real estate investing in general, it's purchasing different types of real estate with the hope that they either cash flow monthly, so you get a monthly check every single month, or, some people look at it as more of a long-term investment where once you pay down the mortgage in 10, 15, 20, 30 years, you have an asset now that is worth something that you can leverage either to buy more. I know people that have retired with it. They pay for kids' colleges with it, things like that. So real estate investing can really be a lot of different things, and there's a lot of different ways to approach it. But I think that's kind of the beauty of it, and that's why I love it so much.
I want to start with where this passion for it came from, right? Because I remember living in Kentucky and seeing a house that was up for sale next to the train tracks. And I told my husband, because I had been watching a lot of like house flipper shows, right? And I'm like, I could totally flip that.
HGTV?
Total HGTV. I'm like, I could totally flip that house. And my husband is looking at it like with a rational mind. He's like, this house is right next to the railroad tracks. We don't know how long we're going to be staying in Kentucky for. He's like, this sounds like a really bad idea. But somehow, like, I had that bug that I feel like I need to do this just because I saw somebody else do it.
Hmm.
So I want to kind of like bring it to like, why this, right? Like, what is it about it that gravitated you towards it? What is it about it that is so exciting?
I think for me, what brought me towards investing in real estate is the possibilities that it opens for the long term. So I like to say, I am looking at what I'm doing today as setting me up for 20, 30, 40 years down the line. But I also love that you can put your own spin on it. There's not one right way to do it. And for us, what I really like is my partner and I, we invested in a small duplex and we actually had so much fun. The two of us, we got our hands dirty. We completely renovated the unit that we lived in for a little while. And it was just really fun to be able to make it our own and then turn around and see somebody else get to enjoy that too. So it's a really cool balance of obviously practical financial decisions that we're making for the long term, but you get to let your creativity shine too. So it's a good blend.
Did you actually get into the whole, like, going to Home Depot every day and buying things to renovate it? And like, did you get into the whole construction part of it?
Yes, let's just say my Pinterest board and my partner's Home Depot points balance are very, very full. So it's again, yeah, it is really cool. We got to learn, what works, what doesn't work, how to not so much DIY, but how to do things in an efficient way too. We're not loaded. We're not trying to spend millions and millions of dollars in this. I don't have $1 million yet. So
Mhm.
it's like we don't have that money. So again, it was like that cool balance of trying to be able to do something that looked really well, that was a good solid product, but also was very affordable and something that kind of the average everyday person would actually be able to do.
Let's talk about the average everyday person. And I actually want to go back to what you said about being in corporate and seeing the CEOs and feeling like, this is all they have. Can you tell me more about that? I feel like nobody wakes up one day and says, I think I'm just going to go into a completely different industry. I think that usually something happens in our normal life that kind of breaks that dream, that kind of breaks that, it like gets us out of the dream state that we're in corporate, that everything is taken care of for us, that we have a steady salary, that we have a good job.
Hmm.
So why would we mess with that? There's something that breaks that magic, that makes us go like, wait a minute, there's a better way. I'd love to know if you have that story of yours that made you wake up one day.
Yeah, so for me, what ended up happening is when I was in like the thick of the corporate side of things, I was traveling a ton. And growing up, I used to be in athletics. I rode, again, being in the Boston area, head of the Charles, I actually rode crew.
Wow.
I was a runner, I played softball, I rode horses. So I was always very active. And then when I got into traveling for work, that kind of fell off for me. And there was a slew of travel. I was going from one side of the world to the next, to the next. And I felt like I got to a point where I didn't really know who I was anymore between the stress of the job and then just physically just not feeling good about myself. I was just in this really weird place of like, something's got to give. So for me, what actually ended up happening is I found a fitness program. It's going to sound so silly. I found a fitness program through this girl online, and she opened up my world to just being okay with focusing on yourself a little bit more. So I started getting more into personal development. I started reading audiobooks and listening to podcasts. I started working out for just short little increments, fitting it into my schedule. And so I started to notice, okay, I'm feeling better. I'm doing still well at work. But once I started to get into the podcast, diving deeper into kind of myself and what I wanted out of life, I'm like, something just wasn't aligned. So it wasn't a big pivotal moment, I would say, that took me away from corporate. It was just a bunch of little actions of me taking care of myself again and realizing that for whatever reason, I just knew there was something else out there for me that wasn't what I was doing at the time. And so I just kind of ran with it. And then a few years after I decided to make the jump into real estate full time, again, the whole Steve Jobs connecting the dots going backwards, I actually ended up getting diagnosed with cancer 2 years after I left that stability. So I didn't have health insurance anymore. I didn't have that steady paycheck or anything. But honestly, that I think was a turning point and made me realize that I actually made the right decision because I had full control over my schedule, my finances, my life, my well being, everyone around me. And I've just kind of been able to run with that since.
Okay, there's so much.
Gave you a lot there.
There's so much in there. I definitely want to talk about what that cancer journey was like, because so many people who are listening have experienced this or know a loved one who has
Mhm.
gone through it. What was that like for you? Do you still remember getting that diagnosis?
Oh, like it happened yesterday. I do. And the weird part for me is I actually had a harder time, I think, after I was deemed to be in remission. The mental shift that I had to make that, hey, that focus, that part of my life is kind of not over, but that's been taken care of. Now it's like I have to try to move forward. But the day that I got diagnosed, um, I wasn't it's funny, I wasn't shocked. I wasn't scared. It was a very like, this is just something that I'm being presented with, and I have two options. I can either do what I need to do to move forward and tackle it head on, or I can retreat and use it as an excuse or a reason to just kind of shut down, to give up, to let just the worry and the fear and the doubt take over. And the reason I was able to choose the first option to just tackle it head on was because a few years prior, when I was still in corporate, I started taking care of myself again. I started to take care of my mind, take care of my body, and I think it just put me in a really strong place to say, you know what, I already made a big change. I tackled something huge by leaving corporate stability. And now it's like, who's to say I can't tackle this? So it's funny looking back, those little micro moments of, you know, proof that if it doesn't always have to necessarily look linear, but when you look back, it's like those little tiny actions that you've taken over time really set you up for something that you don't even know is coming your way.
And
So,
that is amazing that it happened that way, that you started to get into personal development and then you got faced with this, the biggest challenge of
something you
all.
never ever think is going to happen to you.
Right. Do you remember what led up to you getting diagnosed? What were the first signs? What are some things that you tell people like you need to watch out for this because that was your first sign of it? Like
Yeah.
guide us through that part of that story.
Yeah. So, just to be specific, to give you the full timeline, I was 26 years old and it was 2018 and I had been training for a marathon. I decided, my best friend and I were like, we're going to run the Chicago Marathon. So 26.2 miles. Some people ask why. I don't know. I'm one of those weird people. I love it. It just gives me the high. It's fun for me. So we were training that year for it. We started training in April. The race was in October. And I was just always sick. And it wasn't sick where I was like, I had the flu, I was hospitalized sick. It was just, I had a cold here and there. I was exhausted more. I had walking pneumonia in the middle of the summertime. It was just all these little weird things. But again, I was like, you know what? I'm pushing my body. I'm training hard. That's probably what it is. So nothing really outstanding, but I just also brushed it off as to, I'm a 26-year-old healthy girl. It can't be anything serious. So fast forward October, I ran the Chicago Marathon first week and finished, did great, felt great afterwards. And then 3 weeks later, I literally woke up and I went to go get out of bed and I noticed in my groin, I had a lump the size of a golf ball. Now, silly thing, I was a bio major, remember, biomedical. I understood the body, anatomy, all this stuff, but I hadn't been feeling well again. And so I was like, in my head, all right, you have lymph nodes. If you're feeling sick, sometimes they get swollen. So I wrote it off again. Wrote it off for another month and a half. More and more of those golf balls started to pop up. And then finally, right before Christmas, I was like, all right, I got to do something, because that's when I was like, something's off. It's not going away. It's not getting better. So I did what everyone tells you not to do. I did my whole Google MD. I
Mm-hmm.
diagnosed myself. So when I walked into my primary care's office, she was like, I think you need to go to the hospital. And I was like, doctor, what do you think it is? And I was like, I can handle it. And I had said that. Again, I did the research. I was prepared. I was kind of like, worst case scenario, what are you going to do? Okay, if I'm okay with that answer, I'll be fine. She was like, I think it's serious. I think you probably have cancer. And I was like, okay. So I go to the hospital that day. I go through all my scans, my blood work, my testing. My parents came to visit. My boyfriend came to visit. They all stayed in the hospital with me that night. And then it was about a week later, they came back and they were like, yeah, you have stage 3 blood cancer. And I was like, oh, okay. So after that, though, the question was just, now what? I took it. And then it was like, okay, what do you do next?
Where do you think that mindset comes from? Right? That looking at it and saying, well, this is just another challenge and we're just going to figure out, put one foot in front of the other and just do it. Where does that come from? Because you could have taken that in so many different ways,
Yeah.
but you didn't.
Yeah, and and don't no, don't let me fool you. I had my days. I had the days where my boyfriend would come home. It was right after treatment for me during the middle of it all, and I was just like, "F this." Like,
Hmm.
I'm done. I can't do this. I'm tired. Again, I'm a human. We're all humans. We're gonna have those moments where we feel really strong and like, okay, we can do it. And then you're gonna have the moments of weakness. And I definitely had all of those, but I think again, overarching, it just came back to I took little steps. I was big into journaling. I was big into gratitude, appreciation for what I had in my life at the time. And I think that was just my brain. I trained my brain to just default to, okay, what do you have right now? What's all the good? What's worth fighting for? What have you been blessed with? Who do you have in your corner? Versus focusing on, all right, well, what is this going to mean? How bad is this going to be? How much is this going to hurt? What is this going to take away from me? And I think that really makes a big difference in people's lives. It's just, again, it's not always easy. And I have my times on the road where I'm like, this person in front of me shouldn't be in front of me right now. Or, okay, I forget something at the grocery store. Or, I lose clients and something doesn't go well. It's like, again, we're all going to have the days. But at the end of the day, if you can try to just focus on a few small things that you do have, I think it makes that much of a difference. And I think that's just where the mindset was for me. And that's what I had in front of me. So it just made it easier to make the decision of like, okay, we got this.
How long were you in treatment for?
I was in treatment for the process as a whole between getting diagnosed. I ended up freezing my eggs and then finishing chemo and then finally getting my final scans. The whole process was about 10 months. I was in treatment every week for 6 months.
Freezing your eggs, I would have never thought.
Yeah.
I would never have thought about that. How did you even come up with that one?
My mom. My mom was, again,
Thank you, Mom.
yeah, seriously. Well, looking at the time, I was like, Mom, seriously? Do we need to do this? And looking back again, I'm like, you know what? I'm 32 now. I don't have kids yet, and I don't know what's going to happen. But hey, worst case scenario, I have an option.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, she was the one that was like, I think it's a good idea. I was like, okay.
And I do have to say that this month marks 5 years since you finished your treatment.
Mhm.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
How, looking back, how far you've come in 5 years, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
Sometimes it doesn't feel real. But I look back and I have the moments. I always joke, and like if you follow me on Instagram, I have moments where I look at my hair and I'm like, this is 5 years. It's not anything pretty right now, but I'm like, again, you don't notice it every single day necessarily, but you have those just aha moments of like, I did that. Like I got through that. And another thing that I look back on is I just am forever grateful for the support system around me. Whether it was coworkers, colleagues, clients, family, friends, it was just I couldn't have done it. Yes, I had the mindset to do it, but I couldn't have done it without the people in my corner. Whether you have 100 people in your corner, whether you have 2 people, all you need is just those 1 or 2 people to really give you that lift and just let you know that they're there, and it makes all the difference. So,
It really does. Thanks to all the heroes who are caretakers, right?
mhm.
Because somebody may be going through something really hard, but like caretakers are out there really like propping us up,
Yeah.
right? I'm gonna tell you the thing that makes me here tear up, and I'm here like crying. I didn't even bring tissues or anything. We need to make a mental note to have
Yeah,
tissues here.
next time.
The tissues are for me, by the way. The guests are fine. I'm the one crying. The thing that really like pushed a button for me was the hair, right?
Mhm.
Because I did see that in your social media. You're like, it's the hair that always gets me.
Mhm.
Can you tell me what that was like? I remember I saw one of your reels where you actually show a picture of you losing your hair and cutting your hair, and you're like, it's always the hair. Can you tell me what that you who have gone through it? What is that like?
Yeah. It was hard. It was really hard. When I first started treatment, they told me, they were like, you probably have, you know, 2 or 3 rounds, 2 or 3 sessions before you'll start to notice it. And it was after the second session that I woke up and it was just, oh, this is real. Like that, I think that was a big realization of, all right, like we're in this. Like things are going to start to change and I'm not going to really have much control over it. So once that happened, again, it was the decision of, do I want to keep seeing that every day and be reminded of it, or do I want to try to take control myself? So my boyfriend was an angel, and I had a hard time. I got out of the shower that day, and I was like, "We got to get rid of it. We got to just do it." He goes, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "All right." He goes, "I'll do it." I was like, okay, sounds good. So we sat in the bathroom that day. I shaved my hair and he ended up shaving his. And then
Oh,
funnily enough, which I always think this is, I love the story. We went to go show my dad. So we show up to his house. Well, he had just gotten his hair cut that day and he had shaved it all off. So there's a picture the first day that I shaved my head and it was my boyfriend, me, and my dad. None of us had hair.
oh, wow.
But you just making the most of it. Like I got wigs. One of my friends' moms had survived breast cancer. She had a few wigs that she wore a handful of times, so they gave me a few different wigs. I had gotten a wig through Dana Farber. And like, again, silly things, just making the best out of, tough situations. We named each of the wigs. So I had different wigs depending on what mood I was in that day and all that stuff. So we had fun with it. And then when my hair started to grow back, it grew back very different. You hear about people talking about chemo curls. My hair was always straight like this. While it was growing back, I had the curliest, and the darkest hair. It was just so wild to like your body, just what it's capable of, what it does. But looking back, I would say probably once or twice a year, I would just be in the mirror brushing my hair, and I was like, oh wow, like look how long it's gotten. And I said that from the time it got to here to the time it grew all the way down here. And again, it's that reminder of you don't always see things if you're not showing the gratitude or if you're not looking for the good stuff. You may not always find it, but if you are kind of looking for things, it's like you don't see it every single day necessarily. But if you have those moments where you're like, like it doesn't happen overnight, it's not going to happen overnight. But if you give things time and if you just try to keep trucking forward, your hair is always going to grow back. Things are always going to happen. You just got to keep moving day by day.
I love that story. I mean, I'm going to inject my own here.
Yeah.
My father, he went through having lymphoma and he went through treatment and he lost his hair. And up until that point, he had very dark hair, but he had started to get a little salt and pepper. And, we would tell him like, hey, you're getting white hair. And he's like, I don't have white hair, right? Like, he was in complete like denial. This was before treatment, complete denial that he was going gray. And after chemo and his hair grew back, it grew up blacker than ever. So we're like, you don't have gray hairs anymore. And he's like, I know. That's what I've been telling you all along. I don't have gray hairs. So, but that really like touched me when you talk about the hair because it's like, it's the one most visible part of the disease. Congratulations on being in remission for this long.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm really curious to know because you started your personal development journey before finding out about cancer. So I'd love to know if you remember particular teachings that got you through it, particular books that you were reading or podcasts that you were listening to, and like, what were the things that you're grabbing onto the most?
I think one of the biggest practices that was honestly a common thread throughout a lot of the personal development stuff, it's just the journaling, the gratitude and the journaling. I've already said it a bunch of times on here. Obviously, it's for a reason, but every podcaster that I was listening to, every book that I was listening to or reading, the common theme of people who were successful or people who, whether that success was on a financial level, whether that was on a spiritual level, whether that was on a relational level, physical level, it was they always took time, whether in the morning or in the evening, to show gratitude. And, you can do it as simple as like I started with a 5-minute journaling. Every single day I just wrote down 5 things I was grateful for. I would sit down, I would look at them, I would let them sink in. And for whatever reason, that would just kind of be the focus of the day. So it's like if you then get cut off in traffic or you spill your coffee and it's like, it makes it a lot easier to laugh at stuff like that. When I had to shave my head, it was just kind of like, yeah, but you know what? I had hair for so long. My hair will grow back, and the gratitude that day was just like, I had a really good partner who was fully supportive and he just wanted me to know that I was still beautiful with or without hair. You know what I mean? So it's just the gratitude piece and the journaling and like really taking time to take inventory of what you have was a big piece. The podcast at the time that I was listening to and the woman that actually got me back into the whole fitness realm, personal development is this woman, Keisha. Now her name is Keisha Get Mary. And she has a podcast called Empower Her. And that was, again, just little nuggets. She's very much an open book. She shares her story about just kind of similar. She was in corporate. She left, became an entrepreneur. Now she's mom. So it's just been really cool to see her journey over time. But same thing. She's just very raw, open, honest, and just finding people that you can relate to like that too I think was a big thing, knowing that you're not alone. People are people.
I am curious to know while you were going through all of this, which is not easy, right? This is not, I hope we're not making it sound like, oh, this
I
is a
know.
breeze, right? Like this is like really hard stuff that you have to find so much strength inside yourself to even make it another day, to stop thinking about it, to laugh at the coffee being spilled, to like, all these things. At the same time, there's this new real estate career going on,
Yeah.
right? It's not like everything was normal and then we had something else. It's like there's all these new and really challenging things happening. So I'm curious to know, while you were going through treatment, what was the status of the real estate business and investing? What was your mindset around it, and what happened after? So like, where is the real estate at that point?
Yeah, so the real estate was mostly just the sales I was doing. I was trying to build up my book of business, build up clients. I had a handful of clients at the time.
And when you say real estate sales, you're selling houses. You're being a real
Yes, I'm
estate
helping
agent.
buyers and sellers. I'm being an
Got it.
agent. I hadn't become an investor yet.
Hmm.
And I think me going through the cancer journey solidified my desire to get into investing too. Because again, when I left the corporate job, I no longer had health insurance. I no longer had the 401k that everyone's investing into. I no longer had that stable paycheck that was coming every week or every month or whatever it is. And in just having conversations, even with my parents, they didn't necessarily know growing up how to set themselves up for retirement, for the future. So while I was kind of facing just the reality of how short life can be, how anything can happen, and then I'm helping these people buy these houses and take the next chapter in their lives, whatever that was looking like, it kind of got me thinking of like, okay, obviously I never thought I would ever encounter something like getting cancer. What can I do? So if and when life throws these curveballs at you, what can I do to support myself and set myself up to be able to focus more on the chemo and taking care of myself versus like, how am I going to pay the bills? What am I going to do? So I think I had more of a drive, as weird as that sounds. In part too, I think me staying working was helping me avoid some of the struggles of going through chemo too. It was kind of like that, hey, if I can stay busy over here, I don't have to face some of what I'm dealing. You eventually face it anyways, but at the time it was working for me.
Hmm.
So yeah, I actually took off running, and once I finished chemo, I sat down and my boyfriend and I were talking, and we were like, all right, so we got through that part. It's like, what's next? And that's when I flipped a switch and I was like, we got to buy something. We got to buy something. We got to do house hacking, mortgage helper. The possibilities are endless. I started going to meetings and just chatting with people and throwing it out into the universe. And then we bought our first place, bought our second place 2 years later, bought our fixer-uppers that we're finishing now. And so it just kind of snowballed. And yeah, that was cancer was the catalyst for life is short. You got to just take the risk and go after what you want.
Okay,
Really.
that's a quote right there.
That
Like, just
literally.
like that's it,
You hear it too.
right?
Yeah.
So, tell me about buying the first property,
Mhm.
because I'm here thinking, well, I'm gonna have to save up so much money so that I can pay down. It's like buying another house without selling my own. That seems so overwhelming. Like that's like so much money that I don't have in my bank account right now.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about buying that first home and how do you make that doable?
Yeah. So again, you're going to have people tell you, and this is the beauty of real estate. You're going to have people tell you that you don't need to put any money down. You can use OPM, other people's money. You're going to have people tell you that it's really hard. It's really risky. You need to have a lot of money. And then you're going to have the people like me, I like to say that it's like, no, you can find what works for you. So the way that we did it, it was our first house. So we got to take advantage of first time homebuyer programs, little money down. What we did that was different than a lot of people buying their first house is we bought a duplex. So we had a unit that we were going to be living in, and then we rented out the other unit. So for us, that was really beneficial because I was still building a consistent income and we didn't have a ton of money to put down. So we were able to leverage a really small down payment. We put like 3%, 3.5% down. And then that gave us the cash in our pocket to fix up the place. All the while, we had someone else below us paying a portion of our mortgage because they were paying rent every single month. So for us, it was a slower way to get started in the investing space, but it also gave us the time and the financial resources to figure out, is this something we actually want to do? We got to dip our toe. We had it one tenant. So it's like, all right, yeah, we can handle it. We got that all settled. Do we actually enjoy owning a house? because I'll tell you, home ownership is not for everybody. Landlord life is not for everybody. So we got to figure out, okay, are we okay making repairs? Calling the plumbers, taking care of the yard, doing all that stuff. And we lived there for about a year and a half, and we're like, yeah, we could do this again. And then we just kind of rinsed and repeated. But it was a really good way. If you're unsure, I think that's the best way to get started.
I am also hearing of this a way of investing. I'm really curious to know your perspective on it. I heard somebody say that a really good way to get into it is to take advantage of something. I don't know what the program is called. You're the real estate expert, so you'll tell me what this is called. But basically, you can, if you live in the house that you buy, then that gives you a break. I don't know if it's in taxes or in some way, shape, or form. So essentially, if you go around moving from house to house to house and
House hacking.
that's what house hacking is.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about that? I'm gonna explain like what is it that was I was talking just to finish a thought, but you're gonna actually like draw it out for us. So yeah, I know people who move into an apartment or to a house, they fix it up, they get it a new kitchen, they live in there for a little while, and then after a certain amount of time, they go and they buy something else and they rent the last one. But because they're going to be moving into a place that they're living in, that's different than buying a completely investing property where all the capital gains, where the equity, all that stuff has to be taxed on. This is me talking with zero knowledge. So like if anything I said doesn't make sense, that makes sense to me because I have no idea what I'm talking about. Can you please explain what I'm talking about?
First off, you're not very far off. You're pretty spot on with how you explained it.
Okay.
So yes, I will just clarify is all. And that's exactly what we did. So you'll hear the term house hacking. Again, it's a slower process for most because usually when you live in a home per the mortgage that you get, you're supposed to live there for at least a year, sometimes 2 years. So basically, if you say, okay, over the course of 10 years, in theory, if you house hack every 2 years, in 10 years, you'll own 5 houses, if you think of it that way. So I'm like, for people to say like, hey, I own 5 houses, that's pretty cool. It does involve moving. It does involve a lot of packing and unpacking and cluttering and decluttering. So if you're younger too, I would say, obviously, if you have a family, you can still do it. But the reason that we did it a couple of times is because we don't have kids yet. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot easier for us to throw the dogs in the car, pack up, and do it again. But yeah, so what house hacking is essentially you own a property, whether it's a multi-unit property or you can own a single family, and you rent out either rooms or you rent out the other apartment. Some people even have like really big garages, so they'll rent out the garage. But basically, you live in a home, you have some type of mortgage helper while you're living there. Typically, you want to fix it up to a degree. So you make upgrades, whether it's cosmetic, you put a new roof on, you do whatever you need to do. Again, just to help you build a little bit of equity in the house. And then after a year or 2 years, depending on what the requirement is, you then keep that house, you rent it out fully, and then you go live in another property. Now, because that property is your primary residence, that's where the benefit comes in. Because you are living in that property, you don't have to put 20 or 25% down. Because you are going to be the one living there. You can put as little, again, as 3% down. Typically, you'll see people put 3 to 5% down. And so again, rather than putting $100,000 down, maybe you're only putting 20,000 down or 15,000 down. And then you live there, you fix it up a little bit, live there for a year or two, whether you rent a room out, maybe you even just want to live there on your own. You don't want to have anyone else paying you mortgage helper for that one. And then you want to do it again. You can either sell it or you rent that one out. And again, if you move, as long as you live there, you don't have to find this exorbitant amount of money to put down.
Is there a consideration when it comes to interest rates, right? Like when I refinanced my house back in 2020, right? And we're talking 2020, a very, very special year in history, right? We refinanced down to like 2% or something. Do you know what? Of course, you know. What are the interest rates right now?
So they've dropped a little bit, which is exciting. I say that they're not the worst, but we're looking at probably mid-6s right now.
Mid-6s.
Yep.
So what does that tell you? Do you look at the interest rate and wait for it to go down in order to go and buy? Does that factor into the decision at all? Like, what is your philosophy when it comes to like waiting or just doing it anyway?
My philosophy is, and it's a cliche for a reason, best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Second best time is now. If you have the means financially, if you have the mindset, and if you are physically able to do so, the sooner you get into the real estate market, no matter what point it is in, if you're going to be holding on to it for the long term, you're only going to benefit. If you look at history, they say year over year, on average, home prices appreciate, maybe by a small amount. Again, the unicorn years of 2020 to 2022, those were just crazy with the appreciation that we saw. But for the last 50 years, on average, home values have increased. Yes, we had the crash of 2008. Yes, they take their dips, as do anything. But if you're going to be in it for the long haul, you may as well start doing it now. Kind of like stocks.
Do you say socks?
Stocks.
I'm like, kind of like your socks.
Yeah, just like your socks.
Just like your, I'm like, you're going to have to explain that one to me. It's
No.
like socks.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Is there a magic number that you're going for? Like, do you have a goal to have 10 properties? Do you have a goal of like, I want to have my first $1 million property? Like, what is your big goal?
So for the real estate investing side of it, I will clarify. When I say units or doors, so we own right now, we technically have 9 units, but we have 5 houses.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of them, we have like the 3 family houses. So we consider those 3 units under just one roof. So the ultimate goal is 50 by 50. So I would love to have 50 units, not so much 50 buildings, but 50 units by the time I turn 50. That is the goal.
The first thing the layman person who has no idea about real estate looks at when you tell them, hey, you could own 50 properties is, how am I supposed to manage all of that? So tell us, answer that mystery for us.
I'll let you know when I get to 50. But again, there's property management companies. There's people out there that make, again, real estate you have the salespeople, you have your contractors, you have your big time just investors that do it full time. You have your property managers. I know a lot of people, I have friends that invest out of state too. So they have properties all over the country. And it's just finding your team, finding a management company, finding a real estate agent, finding a lender, finding your contractors, just assembling a team that you trust in whatever region you are investing in and just leveraging that. So for us right now, we manage all of our own properties because they're all super close together. We've actually taken on a few other small properties that we manage for friends of ours. So they have really small portfolios. They own, 6 or 7 doors and stuff like that. And they're all close. So we'll take care of it. We hire the lawn maintenance. We reach out to the tenants. But as you get to a bigger scale, there's companies that will just take care of all that for you. And that is what we will be doing when we get there because I'm not doing it.
Okay. That makes more sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I'm like, how am I supposed to do the plumbing for all of these places?
Yeah.
Have you thought about having properties outside of your local area? And is that recommendable? Like if I bought a property in Florida, managing that from far away, this seems like that would be too much. What is your philosophy on that?
I think you got to just decide what works for you. I do this with clients, whether they're looking to invest, whether they're just looking to buy or sell. It's like, what is the end goal? And then the next question is, what are you willing to do and what are you not willing to do? And based on those answers, you can decide if investing out of state is worth it or not. You also have, I'm talking a lot of long-term rentals. So people who are going to be there for a year. I have friends that have a whole Airbnb model. They own 5 or 6 Airbnbs all across the country. So that's a whole different side of it too. So there's a lot of different avenues. And I think it's just getting really clear on what the long-term goal is and what you're willing to and not willing to handle. And then deciding from there.
We didn't even talk about Airbnb.
I know. Yeah.
We didn't even talk about it.
We could do a whole other.
Okay.
Again, so much. That's what I love about it too. I'm trying to be very reserved right now, but I get so excited just about the possibilities. That's why I like doing the educational side of things, because even if I haven't touched it, we haven't done Airbnb yet, but I know so many people that have. And it's if you have questions, I can put you in touch with people. But it's just the possibilities really are endless. I think it's just such a cool facet to it.
Okay, because that's a really trendy thing right now. It's like, hey, I'm going to go and invest in real estate so that I can have my Airbnb and I can make money in my sleep and all these things. If you had to give me your top 3 things that people need to know before they go and invest in a property to put it out for Airbnb, what are 3 things they need to know?
3 things, I would say it doesn't necessarily apply just to Airbnb in general, it's just investing in general. First thing is real estate is not truly passive. So you are not putting your head on a pillow at night without doing 0 effort and making a profit. You are likely going to be involved for a certain amount of time. unless you have no mortgage on the property and you're paying someone else to handle the whole thing. So the first thing I would say is you need to know that there is work that goes into it, though over time that work becomes less and less. The second thing I would say you need to know when investing, again, more specifically in Airbnb, is look at the local market. Run your numbers, look at what other Airbnbs are doing or investment properties are doing, and make sure that there's a market for it. Yes, competition is going to be high in certain areas. You go down to Nashville, you go down to Orlando, you go out to Denver. There are these markets that are really popular to travel to anyways. A lot of Airbnbs. So that would be just one thing. Make sure there's a market. But then the third thing would be figure out a way to make yourself stand out. So whether you put a theme to your Airbnb, whether you niche down and do just bachelorette parties or wedding parties, maybe you do tiny homes, so just find a way to, whether maybe it's just your service, your concierge service, just stand out above the rest, because that's going to be what keeps people coming back and sharing your Airbnb with other people.
I love that. So first of all, thank you so much for coming and sharing all of this with us and sharing your really powerful story with us. I just have two final questions. What do you think is the biggest misconception that people have of you as a successful real estate investor?
I think the biggest misconception of me that people may have is that I have all the answers. It sounds really weird to say. I am confident in my ability to figure things out. And I think that sometimes comes off as, no, she already knows everything to do. She does it perfectly. She has, no. I believe fully in everything is figure outable, and I am the queen of figuring things out, but I do not know it all. And I am not perfect in replying to our tenants within a 5-hour period, or, getting the plumber in there right away, or doing our check. You know what I mean? It's like life's going to happen. Things are going to come up, but yeah, I don't have it all together all the time.
And I just think actually that's really powerful for everybody to know that you don't need to have it all figured out in order to actually really make a big splash in whatever it is that you're doing. So I think that's just a really good point that everybody just needs to understand, like right now. And finally, if everybody who's listening to this right now, they're either going through their own health journey or they're thinking about real estate, they're looking at you, they're like, I just want to know what my next step needs to be. So what would you tell them, this one thing that they need to do in the next 24 hours?
I would say no matter what you're going through, find somebody that either has gone through it, or more recently, I should say, find somebody who is just a few steps ahead of you, whether it's in their fitness journey, their recovery journey, their investment journey, and reach out to them. Because that's been my biggest game changer. Is when I was going through chemo, I connected with so many people who just I could relate to. And I said, hey, how did you do it? Because the best part is, again, everyone's story is different, especially during the whole survivorship, cancer, your chemo, your treatment, everything is so different. But you can then start to take little pieces from each of their stories or what they have to share and figure out how it relates best to you and how to move forward. Same thing with real estate. Find someone that's a few steps ahead, hear how they got there, take the pieces that make sense for you, and then run with it.
Which leads us perfectly to the next question, which is, how can people find you?
Yeah. So if you want to find me, I'm getting back into it. I have to say, I wasn't very active on Instagram for a while, but Instagram is my playground. That is where you'll see all facets of me. So fitness, family, real estate, cancer, dogs. I love my dogs. So Instagram at gabbydemac.re is really the biggest spot. Honestly, otherwise, if you go to my Instagram, you'll find my email and my cell phone. And just reach out. I'm very much an open book, happy to help people answer questions no matter where they're at. So
thank you so much for coming today, Gabby. This was so amazing. Really, it's such an inspiring story of everything that you have been through, and just give people strength. Realize that the strength is in there. They just draw it out, So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
And thanks everybody for joining us today. Join us for the next episode of the Superhumans podcast.